Hello and welcome to Obscure Movie Reviews, where we love to take a look at some of the more unknown and ambiguous titles in cinema history. Here we focus on movies that are hard to find, on the older side, relatively unknown, or perhaps they simply lack in popularity. Alright, so put on your formal attire as we start this series out with a night on the town with our favorite aristocrat, Dracula. When Transylvanian vampire Count Dracula uses his supernatural power to bend an excitable real estate agent to his will, driving him mad, he moves to London and begins feeding his way through the town. However, it isn't long before he catches the attention of Professor Abraham von Helsing, who discovers the secret of this creature of the night and vows to destroy him before he can lay claim to his friend's daughter. While a relatively loose adaptation of the famous novel by Bram Stoker, 1931's Universal horror film brings with it a charm and elegance not to be found in Stoker's book, but would definitely be emulated from here on. Dracula would become the quintessential vampire for the next century. As the story goes, actor Bela Lugosi was so eager to play the role of Count Dracula on film, something he'd already seen success at on stage, that he agreed to take a dismal salary to make it happen. While it may not have paid well for Lugosi, it certainly paid off for the audience. His performance of Dracula is hypnotic and iconic. Edward Van Sloan also reprises his stage role of Professor Van Helsing, and despite his advanced age, brings a commanding power to the role. The supporting cast performs well enough to make for an engaging group, but by far the runaway performance is from Dwight Frye as Renfield.
Rats, thousands, millions of them.
This man has never been given enough credit for what he could bring to Hollywood, and watching him get sidelined as a B-rated player after this performance is simply criminal. That said, the acting in this film will get a 7 out of 10 overall, with a combination of good performances up to excellent. This is a little tricky to categorize on older films, as the pacing of them is considerably different than modern movies. That being said, there are areas that can feel a bit like they're dragging, but then action happens a bit abruptly. This can actually be lessened quite a bit if you watch the movie with the modern film score by the amazing Philip Glass, which adds quite a lot to it. However, this review is sticking to the original format. On the plus side, the movie itself isn't very long, with a runtime of 1 hour and 15 minutes, so any pacing issues are overshadowed by the fact that the film is a pretty quick watch. Bearing in mind that the pacing is of a style consistent with the time period, I can't be too judgmental on it, but we'll give it a 7 out of 10 for being a little slow in places, but still really easy to sit and watch, and never being boring. This may be the area where the film suffers the most. There are a few really well-crafted shots throughout Dracula, but there are quite a few weak ones as well. This is further compounded if you've ever seen the Spanish version of this film that was shot simultaneously with a Spanish-speaking cast on the same sets. The Spanish version undoubtedly has the superior cinematography and better demonstrates what the camera was capable of. While Dracula makes great use of scale and shows off some of the impressive sets with grand wide shots, it doesn't make very good use of the space, sometimes getting the actors lost in it and other times feeling claustrophobic. While this adds a little to the charm, it detracts a bit from the viewing experience. Also, there's footage on the ship scene that is clearly recycled from an earlier silent film, and I'm never okay with footage being unnecessarily recycled if it didn't have to be and doesn't add anything. This gives the cinematography a 5 out of 10 for simply being average. This is another area where the film lacks a bit. A lot of this has to do with the fact that the film is so early in the talkie period of filmmaking. A lot of directors were still trying to figure out how to make the transition, and it was certainly a growing experience. There was a debate early on about whether or not audiences would accept background music if there was no reason for the music to be in the scene. This debate was settled pretty quickly in the industry, and of course full-blown film scores are exceedingly common, and filmmakers now have to make a purposeful choice not not to include music in a scene. However, while I truly love the modern Philip Glass score, as I mentioned before, there's something eerie about the lack of music that forces the performances to really come to the forefront. Beyond that, everyone is clearly recorded and easy to listen to, giving it a 6 out of 10 for being an above-average soundtrack for the time period. There will be a lot of debate here among Dracula fans. Like many books that are adapted, a lot is lost in translation. While the book is often superior, one could argue that this film adaptation has had considerably more influence on the genre than the novel ever did. When you think of a vampire, you tend to think about this vampire. It hits a lot of the novel's major characters and certainly paints Dracula as menacing rather than romantic, despite his aristocratic flair not present in the novel. In many ways, the story is simpler in the film than the book. Of course, with any page-to-film adaptation, content will be lost due to runtime alone. However, this simpler and easier-to-access story will appeal to a wider audience than the novel will. The plot is easy to follow, with only a few areas that might leave people scratching their heads. There's a subplot involving the character of Lucy that had some of its content cut out that leaves a little confusion, but the rest stands on its own quite well, giving the story an 8 out of 10 for being really quite good. This movie made me fall in love with films in general, and was one of the first movies that I watched on repeat as a kid. That being said, I know I'm a little odd for that, and not everyone will be watching it over and over again. However, there is quite a bit that you can get out of a second, third, or even a fourth viewing. There are quite a few little nuances that come out, particularly where actors' performances are concerned. Renfield is so interesting to watch, and if Dwight Fry had been an actor to show up in later generations, he would have been a shoo-in for other Madman characters like Norman Bates, Hannibal Lecter, or even the Joker. And honestly, how does anyone get tired of Bela Lugosi and the classic lines that he made famous?
I am Dracula. I bid you welcome, children of the night. What music they make.
This one will get an 8 out of 10 for rewatchability. It would have been higher for me, but I have to keep others in mind too. Now my opinion gets to shine. This movie almost single-handedly created a genre that lives on to this day. While it isn't obscure in the sense that it's unknown, it is obscure in the sense that it doesn't receive the necessary credit due to it. This is the one that started me on my filmmaking journey and is the one I keep going back to every time I need a little inspiration or just want to kill an hour in the best way possible. It isn't a perfect film, however. I'm not so love-stricken with it that I completely overlook its flaws. But for me, so much of its flaws are part of what makes it great. For my money, this one is a 9 out of 10 and a must-see for movie lovers. So with those things in mind, Dracula sinks its teeth into an overall average score of 7.14, making it a good movie all around. Thanks everybody for watching. You can check out some of our other material here. We really appreciate you taking the time to watch this. If you have any other obscure movies that you'd really like us to take a look at, feel free to mention it in the comments. Of course, feel free to like, share, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you can get updates on our newest content. It really helps the channel out. Appreciate y'all.